Welcome to Global Education webinar powered by Global Finance Board.
We are your faces today. My name is Diana. I'm from Ukraine, but now I'm MCVP OD and Finance in ISIC in Kyrgyzstan. And also I am a regional consultant for Europe. And awesome Elisa.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm Elisa. I'm from ISIC for Finland, and at the moment I'm the MCVP Financial Legalities here. And with the Global Finance Board, I'm doing consultation for Asia Pacific entities, so I'm the regional consultant for them. And right here with Diana, having this long-term financial planning session for you. So enjoy.
So today we will talk about what is the long-term planning, the sustainability check, what do you need to consider while planning the long-term perspective for your entity. We will present you a few tools that you can use for the planning, and Elisa will present you a few cases to understand more how the long-term planning and sustainability work like, and also we will have a big space for questions and answers. You can ask questions during all the session, so you have right to speak, so you just need to switch on your microphone and talk, or if you don't feel convenient to talk, you can write in the chat, so we will answer all your questions, or you can have some more deep questions for this last part. Cool. So having here you can see 6 standards, and during this session we will focus more on the sustainability, the most mysterious one among all 6. And before talking about the sustainability, I will remind you about the general circle about planning. So first of all, you set your goals, numerical, exchange, HR, and other goals, like all the goals that you want to set. Then you're gathering the data from the previous term, previous performance, you're talking to different people. Also, you're analyzing your market and whatever you need to understand the current situation and the future also. Then you're analyzing everything that you gathered, creating a plan, and the most important part is for sure implementation. And also, while implementing, you need to monitor and to understand how is it going. And also it is happening not only one time, but every term. So first term you're doing that, but also keeping in mind the financial decisions. They are affecting your affecting the next terms. Then you're reminding yourself about the vision that is going to affect your planning in 2 or 3 terms, and also you need to transit everything that have been planned, and also the reasons of these decisions and all the data to your successors to have it continuously, so not just 1 year or 5 years planned, but to be sure that all that was planned will be implemented. So here you can see the arrows, and each arrow means the term and its direction and the strategy. So if you're not transiting and if you don't have the common direction, it might happen that different terms, as we are having only 1 year per one term, will move in different directions. And finally, when you want to achieve 2020 or maybe other milestone, it might happen that during this change in the strategies, visions, and so on, the gap was created and there was not enough time in achieving what was planned and what was wanted to achieve. So imagine all the arrows would have the same direction and this gap would simply not happen. That's why this is really important to have the big vision for several years and to ensure the implementation of the long-term planning. And now I'm passing the voice to Elisa for the sustainability check.
Yes, thank you, Diana. So, sustainability is really important when we think about long-term planning because sustainability is contributing directly that your entity will be growing disruptively in the future too. So, I want to go through the sustainability check in a more theoretical and then more practical way. So, I think you have all seen the sustainability checklist in the finance standards, so I will just quickly go through. So we have the sustainability levels of 1, 2, and 3. So starting from the fact that product price is higher than the direct cost to the level that the profit of the product is higher than the direct and the indirect costs, and also that the whole entity has a profit as consolidated. And in a sustainability level 4, the main revenue driver is the main focus product. For example, if the OGV is your focus product, then that will be also your main revenue driver. And we also have a checklist that the core performance would be higher than 70%. So the exchange income, for example, if that's the OGV, would be about 70% of your total income. And also the debt ratio check, that total liabilities divided by total assets are low enough. We have the check of months of financial reserves, that's recommended to be 6 months, and then it will be able to cover your liabilities for the future with your reserves. And also we have the liquidity check, so liquidity means that you have enough money to pay for your short-term liabilities, that you are not running out of cash just because you collect revenues a bit later than you have to pay the costs. So that's important to check that your bank account is not going to minus at any point. And then also you should have some kind of risk assessment and management, that you know how to react for the worst case scenarios, that you have an action plan ready for those risks. And also ensuring the pipeline and fulfilling team standards, that there are financiers also in the next year, that you are not just the only one and then there is no one to continue. So ensuring the pipeline is really important. And of course that all your conferences are sustainable, that you're not creating loss by having a conference. And last, you should have an education cycle for your LCBPFs, that they get a proper education of finance standards and all the practicalities that they should know. So this is a big checklist, and I know that it's been challenging to fulfill all of those. So then I want to introduce a bit more practical way to look at sustainability. So when you think about sustainability, there are 3 things that you can think about. So first of all, being the entity and product profitability. And it simply means that you don't lose money by doing your operations. That would be the first part. And then secondly is the human resources sustainability. So that you have a person in charge, that you are not losing money. So it's really important that you have the BP finance in your structure. So those 2 things would be the most important ones. And then of course you can have other financial ratios or indicators that will show you if something is going wrong, if something bad is going to happen in the long term. So these kind of things you can think about when you think about sustainability in a more practical way. And right now I want to focus more on the entity and product profitability, meaning simply that not losing money while doing the operations. And there are several ways to make sure that you are not losing money. So you can think about one LC or the MC or products itself, for example, OGV being sustainable or not, or IGV being sustainable or not. But right now I want to focus on the entity sustainability, so that the whole entity is sustainable. So when I'm in Finland, so taking sure that whole Finland is sustainable in its operations. So let's go into examples of that. So we've measured the sustainability levels, and here are examples of those also. So these guys here in the picture, they are in the level 0 right now. So when they consolidate all their incomes and expenses together, they are losing money. And the entity is not sustainable. So this is something you don't want to have. This is the absolute minimum level 0. So you can see that total income is 1,800, and then they have a total cost of 1,900. So they are losing money. You can see the LC tool. They have higher income than cost, but in total it's not enough because the MC is creating loss and also the LC number 1 is creating loss. So in total they are creating loss at the level 0 sustainability. And these second guys in this picture, they are in the sustainability level 1. So this means that the consolidated income is higher than the consolidated cost. So when you calculate all those together, the entity is gonna be in surplus. So the total income is over 2,000 and the total cost is less than 2,000. So it looks good, yes, it's the whole picture, but still there is this one LC, the LC number 1, whose income is smaller than the costs. So this one LC is still creating a loss, which is not nice, but in total the entity is in surplus, so it's okay. It can sustain itself with those incomes. So that would be the level 1. And when we move to the level 2, which is the one you would like to be, where individual and consolidated income is higher than the individual and consolidated costs. So the entity is in surplus and none of the LCs or the MC is making loss inside the entity. So now you can see that the income is always higher than the costs, and in total the income is also higher than the costs. So you could think about your own entity, that at which level are you right now and which level would you like to be in the next few years when you do your long-term planning. So I'd like to ask you now, all my delegates, so do you recognize in which level are you right now? You can maybe write the number and a name of a country to the chat box. Okay, I see people writing, that's really nice. Right here in Finland, I would say that we are in a level 1. In total, we are making a surplus, but there are some LCs which are making loss at the moment. So I think we're at the level 1 at the moment, but we are aiming to get to level 2 by changing our pricing, for example. Okay, Andrea from Romania, have no idea what level they are. It's okay.
So, for example, if to talk about Kyrgyzstan, I think we are level 2 because we cut all the opportunities to make loss and all the extra costs and so on. So like all entities and MC also, we're generating only income because we have no opportunity to generate loss. Like loss for us is impossible, so like the system is like generating only profit. Yeah, this is not because like we are super nice with having money, but somehow we are managing that. Even that's
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and Tianmin from Malaysia is saying that his LC is on a level 2, but not sure for the MC level. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, and try to continue. And as NC, Timmy Sir, level 1, but I don't know about for the NC perspective, as we are sustainable as an LC, but we don't have a sustainable products. Okay. Okay, so you have some other income there also. Alright. That's interesting to hear. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so this is something you should keep in mind once you do your long-term planning. And now we move on to Diana's part.
yeah. So how we are planning that long-term sustainability. When you're asking how, there are several tips. So first of all, you're reviewing the current state that you have right now. Then you are planning in the timeline the events, fixed costs and investments which you are planning. For example, different conferences, pricing increasing or decreasing, different investments in HR and operations, because as we know that for operations to grow we really need to invest. So when we are planning 2020 achievement, we need to understand when and where do we need to invest money. Then we are choosing the focus program and the strategy. So focus means that investing less time, money and people, we are getting the biggest outcome. So just imagine you have one unit of resources, time, money and people, and you are investing it into one product, out of which product you would get the most. Then we are somehow forecasting and estimating how it can change and develop for the next 5 years. And for sure, all the changes that we are accepting, they have to be legislated and put into the compendium or constitution, to be sure that all these things will be developed and executed by you, other people, and the next term. Few questions that you need to ask yourself during this process is how AI fee, LC fee, MC fee will change, increasing or decreasing. How much the number of people will increase, because with the increasing of operations we need also to increase the amount of people and the better management for sustaining the quality of operations. Do prices need to be changed? And how the MC team will change with decreasing of the operations. It includes the structure of the MC team, also the amount of people, because you need to adjust the structure of the entity for the growing of operations. Maybe you want to share some things, also some tips or maybe questions that you are using in your entity for these things. Or maybe if you already have the long-term planning, how it was happening and what you were considering while doing it. Like, and you can just switch on your mic and talk or write down in the chat. Yeah, so the question was if you are using some tips maybe that were not mentioned for the long-term planning, or maybe you are also including some things in this long-term planning that you want to share with us. So for example, on the morning, Sandra from Lithuania shared the tip that when you are making this long-term planning, you also need to adjust your national education conferences to your timeline, and it will impact the way people are educated and the way they can execute operations. Oh, cool. So, like, if you have the financial projection, maybe you can share how it was developed. It's so pity that you're in the cafe, because we would really love to hear your voice and in general to have more live conversations with our delegates.
Hi. Basically, we have a financial projection, which started during my predecessor's term, and we just estimate like per year how many goals we targeted for our products for IGV and OGV. Then after that, we estimated the fixed cost that we'll be having for a term. Then after that, we all the indirect costs together. So actually, we have a spreadsheet. Spreadsheet with formula, so if we insert all the amount and the data, and it will actually create a graph, and we can actually see that whether can we sustain for the next year or not. Yeah, to be specific, actually we have like per month projection.
Okay, it sounds really interesting. So now I will share the tools that we as GEW want to share with you, but also it would be nice if you could share your tool in the WhatsApp chat for the global education webinars, so all people can also take a look. So I think it would be really useful, and we will be grateful if you can do it. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. So now let's move to the magic tool. I will send in the chat right now a link for the spreadsheet. This is a part of your challenge task. As you remember that after every webinar you have a challenge task and also quiz that you need to fulfill. So in this challenge task there's a link for the tool that we are proposing you to consider for the long-term planning. It looks somehow like this. So after you will enter the tool, you will see that there are different cells. Like colorful cells, you're not touching them because there are formulas that will count everything by itself. But if the cell is empty, it means that you need to insert some numbers there. So how to check if the cell is with the formula or not? You just click on the cell. So if you see the formula in the row, so you're not touching that cell. But if it's empty and white, so yeah, this is for you. So there are two tools: the long-term planning and the product pricing analysis. So the long-term planning shows you the perspective and the forecasting of some financial indicators, sustainability 1 to core performance, and also the revenue decreasing, the cost increasing, net profit, and exchange revenues, direct cost, indirect cost, for several terms after this one. So down you need to enter in this tool the number of approves, the product pricing. While considering the product pricing, it's important for IGV plan for the future operations only partners incomes, because due to the project no double fee, we are charging partners but not EPs, and this is important when you're planning your future IGV development. Then direct costs and indirect or other costs. So maybe if you can't estimate, like, I know, previous few terms, just try to not maybe exact amount, but how do you estimate the previous terms? Yeah, so this is for the long-term planning and sustainability analysis. And yeah, so did everyone get into the tool? Do you have any problems with access? So it's not obligatory to get right now into there. I'm just explaining what can you find there, and awesome. So I'm just explaining what can you find there and how can you use it. So after you will get the challenge, and you will need to spend a bit more time on that after the session, and just look how it can help you. So you will have more time for yourself and your long-term planning after the webinar. So yeah, and the product pricing analysis. The interesting part about this tool is that it shows you the optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic non-IGV profit loss and total IGV profit loss. Why? Because when you're generating profit or loss, IGV as the most not sustainable product, you can see how much loss is generated by this product and by other departments. So it can help you understand what to do with this product and how to cover your costs and by your revenues. Here you need to also insert the product pricing, cost per product, and the number of approves. Also indirect and other costs. And all other will be shown you by the formulas. And it will help you to understand the product pricing. Is it nice for you or not really? Cool. So you will have more time with the tool, and if you will have any questions, just feel free to enter your questions into the feedback in the quiz, and we will definitely get back to you with the answers. More on we didn't review it constantly, we focus more on current LC budget. Yeah, sure. So I will repeat the message from the beginning. It's with the link to WhatsApp. I hope this is the one. Yeah. Am I right? Yeah, it should be like that. Also, we will share in the end the quiz, and you will have a feedback form there for all your questions if you will still have them. Cool. So now we are moving to different scenarios. After you are estimating your sustainability and pricing with these tools, you can see how your entity is going to move, and Elisa will explain more about how different.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And Yanmin was sharing an interesting comment here that they are not using the long-term tool right now, but they are focusing more on the current LC budget. So yes, I guess that there are more urgent things now to focus on the budget. But long-term planning is something that might not feel urgent right now, but it will pay off in the longer term if you have a proper plan. But it's interesting to hear that you're not right now using the long-term tool, but maybe sometime you have more time to work on the long-term planning also. Okay, so right now, as a little exercise, I would like to share you 3 different kind of LCs. Okay, Yanni didn't know that I will focus more on long-term planning in the future. Great. Okay, and now sharing with you 3 different kind of entities. How does their 5-year look like? So when I'm sharing these like stories about different entities, you could think about if you recognize your entity in one of these, or if absolutely not. So let's move on. So first we would have the entity A. So you can see that they have exchange revenues, but they have more exchange costs. So actually they are creating loss with their exchanges. And the bank account balance there, we have put 5,000 at the beginning, so now it will be 4,000 after creating 1,000 loss. So this is how this table will work like. So this is the NTA in year 1. In the year 2, they are still making loss with their exchanges, and you can see that they have no investments into membership or operations. So with membership investments, you could, for example, send them to conferences, or with operation investments, you could have a really kick-ass IPS or have cool marketing materials. So this entity A is doing neither of those, so they are not investing in membership or operations. And then you can see the result of that happening in the 3rd year when their exchange revenues are decreasing. But their exchange costs remain to be the same. They might, for example, have a fixed term contract that they need to pay every year, and that's why the costs remain the same. And they are creating again a 1,000 loss in exchanges. And their bank account balance is just decreasing. And in the year 4, since they didn't invest anything on a membership or operations, their exchange revenues have decreased to 0. Maybe their members have lost, or maybe the members quit because they didn't get the proper education, or there was no one to go on exchange because there was no proper marketing, so they still continue creating an even bigger loss. And in the year 5th, you will be in bankruptcy because you don't have any revenues, because no members, no operations, but still costs. So this would be the worst case scenario for an entity to happen. So I hope no one recognized themselves from this scenario. So this would be the entity A. And moving on to entity B. So they also have unsustainable operations in the beginning, so creating a loss. And the first year they realized, okay, we are creating a loss, we need to do something. So in the year 2, they start focusing more on membership and operation investments. So even though they are making just a break even with the exchanges, so revenues are equal to cost, so plus minus 0, they still make some kind of investment into membership because they have some reserves in their bank account. So in that pays off in the year 3, and they are able to increase their exchange revenues to 1,500 and cut some costs. And they still continue investing in membership and operations. For example, they make a big marketing campaign and they have to pay a bit for that, but they are able to turn their loss into profit on the 3rd year because of the investments. And on the 4th year is getting even better. There are more exchange revenues, and there are also some other revenues coming from somewhere, and they still continue investing, and the profit is still increasing from the year 3. So now they are slightly increasing their profit to 500 and making even bigger investments into membership and operations. And in the year 5, it's even better, more revenues and more profit in the end, and still able to make investments. So this would be an example of a positive cycle of first investing into membership or operations and that paying off in the future years. So you can think about, if you recognize your entity here, if your entity is able to make some investments now into membership, and how it will affect your long-term plan, as your exchange revenues should be increasing because of the investment. So I hope that you recognize yourself from this entity B. And the last one is the entity C. So they, again, have unsustainable operations, but they have this big other revenues here, 3,000, which is enabling them to make a profit. And they also make investments into membership and operations, but for example, maybe sending members to not that important conferences, still doing something. And because they see that other revenues are really profitable, and these other revenues could be, for example, from a student event like career days. So okay, let's say that other revenues are career days for the entity C. So they see that, okay, this career event pays off, it's really nice, so let's focus more on this. So on the year 2, they are focusing on the career events and making even less exchange revenues. But they still are able to make the profit because they get the other revenues from the career days. And the educated members, to which the entity is investing in, decide, okay, this is a good plan, let's focus even more on the other revenues, and let's give the exchanges less attention. So on the year 3, you can see that the exchange revenues are still decreasing, and the other revenue is even higher, and the profit is also higher. So the entity thinks, okay, this is nice, but in the year 4, something happens and other revenues disappear. For example, this career days is cancelled, and now the entity finds itself in a situation that it doesn't have any other revenues, and the exchange revenues are really small, and there are big exchange costs, and the entity is making a huge loss because of this fact. And in the year 5 is even worse. They are again have to pay a lot for the exchange cost and minor exchange revenues. And they are little by little eating up their reserves because they focused on the other revenues in the cost of exchanges. So this is something that can happen if you lose the focus of your core operations, because you cannot be sure of those. So that's why you should be focusing more on the core operations. So the next thing would be asked to you, for which scenario do you recognize your entity, or if you do, or if you can see some characteristics to which direction your entity is going. So now you can speak or type or however you wish to communicate. Okay, so Yanmin has a question. So, if my product doesn't bring much revenue to my LC for the next term, can I shift my focus on making conferences and events to generate revenue? Okay, this is a bit risky, like you see in the entity C. So I would first advise you to think about if you could make your products sustainable, to make your products creating profit. If you, for example, have there some kind of cost that you could cut, or if the price could be increased a bit. So this would be my advice for you, to focus on the core product still. Okay. Any other comments? Do you recognize your entity? I would say that in Finland I hope we would be in the scenario B, where we'll be focusing on investing in membership, but I have to admit that it's not been happening too much lately, so we need to pay more attention to this. So sometimes we forget to invest in the membership. Yeah, it's working hard to be in the DP. I understand completely. How is it for others? Okay, the same. Yeah, it's interesting how everyone wants to be B, but it's really hard because in order you to be in the DP, you should be planning your future for longer term and actually putting those investments into your plan. So sometimes you think that your term is just 1 year, and then you think about just that 1 year, even though you should be thinking about what kind of investments can we do this year and they pay off next year. So that's the struggle in the long-term planning.
I can share a bit how is it about switching focus to conferences. So I was LCVP in ISIC in Kyiv, and a few years ago we were super rocking in conferences, external, and having kinda nice profit from that. But suddenly we realized that lots of our efforts go to the developing conferences, and when we started changing the focus to growing in exchange, we realized that we are fucking up in conferences. And suddenly it came up that you can't do both together, and doing exchange for us was more important because two focuses are impossible, and this is like the real example how we refused from making conferences. And I think it was only one small event this term, and like our term, so this term I'm not sure. So yeah, and the growth was recognizable when we did it. And also, if you just make the product sustainable and then grow, you have only one focus and your product is bringing money. So it's kind of awesome feeling when you understand that you're both growing and having money.
Okay. Okay, we have another question. So does membership investments imply conferences and trainings? I think that will be the main one. So can you others name other membership investments that could be done?
So sometimes, like, you can consider covering costs of members for some calls and other things, organizing LCMs and these things, also investments.
Yes. Just creating the workspace for that. That's
Yeah.
I think trainings would be the most important ones. For example, investing in that you get your members the TTM, the train the marketeers, for example, that they could take that course and then make more marketing. So these kind of investments would be the main ones. Do we have other ideas from our amazing delegates? Because I see that we have 8 participants at the moment. Any other examples how you've been investing in membership?
Maybe team buildings
Could be.
also can be counted as investments. Yeah. So yeah, for sure, it doesn't have to be like, okay, we have profit, let's go and team building, but yeah, but still, once per quarter, it's a nice thing to keep the atmosphere and the connection between members, so it improves synergy and somehow affects your operations and the way people work.
It's true. Like having a team days can be a real investment if you have a clear outcome what you want to have coming out of the team days, if it's a real team building day. So team days could be an investment also to membership, yes. Okay, and when we are moving on, it's the open space for questions and answers. So anything you might have concerning the long-term planning, now would be the time when you can ask.
No question.
Okay, so under this rating, so I don't know yet about the current situation, but that will definitely be a focus for me if I'll be VPF next year, Hema. And it's really important to consider. Yes, it's really important to consider because like you see in the examples, it's really building up the future. So long-term planning is something you cannot do during a one term, but it's just starting. So if you're now the VPF and you start doing long-term planning, you're doing it for future generations, that they have some kind of direction already. I can share, for example, that in Finland, we didn't have any kind of long-term plan when I was starting my term as NCVPFNL, but I really hope that when I'm ending my term, we will have a 5-year plan how our entity is going to look like in financial terms. So it's really important that you have some kind of guidelines in the beginning to which direction you're taking your entity and think about those investments beforehand. Okay, we have a VP Finance in Specialist Unit. Should I consider the same sustainability indicator like yes?
I think it depends on the way you work.
I don't have a clear answer to this.
Like, I can try. So I think it depends on the way you work, because in different entities it can be really different. So from the number of products that you are allowed to run to the amount of members that you're allowed to have and the amount of departments. But if the structure is somehow the same as the LC, also it depends on the financial model that you have and the amount of money and the way you have to pay for the MC. So if the system is somehow similar to LC, then yes. So like every product has to be sustainable. It doesn't matter if you're expansion or if you're LC or something like that. It's just you need to count on these specific kinds of way that you're paying the money to the MC, or maybe you're not. So if changing the status for you means changing the financial model, this is what you need to consider in your long-term financial planning and the way you have to become the LC and then maybe full member. So for example, in Kyrgyzstan, according to our OD model, we have expansions and we have LCs, only two status. So for the LC, you need to pay all the amount of MC fee. But if you don't, if you have a debt, for the peak, you become the expansion. So for expansions, it's crucial for a peak to pay all the amount of debt for the MC, and then they become the LC and start monthly payment. So if you have something like that, you need to consider it and focus on it to move in the OD model. Yeah, so the question is the same because it depends on the way that this unit can sustain the bank accounts. Yeah, so and this is it. If it's possible legally inside the country, and if you can manage it, because it takes time and someone has to do it constantly, and maybe you need some money for sustaining this bank account. So yeah, if it's possible for you to do it and you think it's useful and has to be there, so why not? But depending on the again financial model. So for example, in Ukraine, at least in my term, like to 1.5 years ago, it was the way that all the expansions, they don't have their own money. All the money that they are earning and spending goes through the MC budget. So, and if it goes through the MC budget, it means that costs and revenues are counted as like from the MC bank accounts. And it was like that. So they, according to the financial model, they had no right to use by their own wish their money. So it was just all managed by the MC team. So yeah, it was like that. So it was one. It depends really on the entity, and you have to consider that.
Thank you everyone joining this webinar, and see you in the other webinars also, and thank you from my side, and evening or day or whatever time it is where you are right now.
Almost night. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for being here. It was really enjoyable, and thank you for engagement.